Hello, I'm Lamisile Pamela Ngubane, and this is the NC Dynamics podcast. NC Dynamics is a culture development consultancy where we believe that culture creates behavior and behavior creates reality. So, the title of this video is A Culture of Self Expression. Okay, so the reason why I'm doing this video is because I think that human beings need to do more to express themselves. Okay, in terms of especially and in line with what I'm trying to do here, the kind of world they want to see and the kind of world that they want to leave for their children. Okay, because I think that we live in a society where we've been conditioned to believe that unless someone is an expert in something, then they shouldn't talk and they shouldn't express their opinion. But in many instances, you'll find, especially when it comes to like the realm of sociology and social development, a lot of people who are experts are not really experts. They've just presented themselves as such. Maybe they have a university degree or two that makes them seem qualified to speak. But if you look at the nature of the world that we live in, I think they've let us down. Similarly with politics, similarly with economics, are you an expert in economics if what you're saying has resulted in this poverty that we see around us? I don't think so. Are you an expert in politics when we find ourselves in a situation where politicians are beholden to their donors, who are usually very greedy, elitist, wealthy people who have exploited the very skewed economic philosophies that we've inherited from the past? I don't think so. You know what I mean? Okay. So I think people, okay, obviously, I'm not going to discount real experts, in their field. There are people who have studied to become master builders of buildings and engines and people who know how to heal the human body when it's sick. But even there, the human body is not treated the way it should be in many cases. That's a whole other story. But obviously there are experts. There are experts in agriculture. But even there, there's a consciousness behind their form of expertise. And it's, in some instances, is very unhealthy for the earth and the soil. You know what I'm saying? So I think we need to really challenge what it means to be an expert, especially and probably indisputably, when it comes to who you are as a human being. I think if there's an expert, an expertise that each of us definitely has, it's the expertise of knowing who we are as human beings, as our individual selves as human beings, and we really should stop outsourcing the management and the leadership of our lives to other people, because I do think that the world that we are living in right now, we're on the brink of, I think, a collapse, right? I'm not trying to be dramatic or anything or alarmist, but I think we can definitely see that there's a lot of disharmony in our society. And it's represented by things like the kind of poverty that we see today. The poverty that we see today also, it's not just like people are stupid and incapable of taking care of themselves. It's because it's by design in many instances. It's by design. Just think about the economic system that we live in, right? And this is something I'm very passionate about because, where I grew up in KZN, in the township I lived in, it was a township and there was some poverty, but there wasn't like the crazy stuff you see in the inner city, Joburg or Pretoria. You know what I'm saying? Or Durban. There was poverty, but there was no like rampant homelessness. People had houses, people were hungry. You knew that there's a neighbor who you will definitely be getting some food from. There were neighbors who were very kind and generous to their neighbors, like my grandmother, you know what I mean? And if families fell into like distress, neighbors would come through and help out. You know what I'm saying? This is very much the Ubuntu culture in action, right? So I think that we as human beings really need to start expressing ourselves in terms of the culture that we want to be the consciousness that drives the economic, political, and social systems of our world. You know how you want to feel when you walk out of your house. You know how you want to feel when you go to your children's school, when you go to church, when you go to the shop to buy groceries, when you go to the gas station to fill up your car. You don't want to feel like you're in poverty. You don't want to feel like you're on the brink of not being able to provide proper nutrition to your children because things are so expensive that, you ask yourself, okay, here we are buying plastic bags at the grocery store. Why? Why are we buying plastic bags at the grocery store? This is a representation of the very messed up consciousness behind our economic system. We're buying plastic bags because apparently we're doing so to offset the carbon footprint that we are having on the planet by consuming plastic bags. Okay, why are we using plastic in the first place? Why are we using fossil fuels? Okay, we've been conditioned to be obsessed with symptoms and afraid, horrified, terrified of looking at the causes, of things. The symptom is pollution, so-called climate change, global warming, all that stuff, right? And I say so-called because the science is not definitive on these things. I'm just going to say it. I don't care. Okay, people tell me I'm a climate denialist. I'm not a denialist. I'm saying, what is the evidence? What is the science? Why are there so many scientists who do not agree? And they have very strong evidence to support their disagreement on climate change, man-made climate change. Okay, cool. Let's say there is such a thing as man-made climate change, né? Why are we using fossil fuels when evidence exists to show that there have been civilizations on this planet before our current epoch that we are living in now, where free energy was the norm because plasma in the environment was harnessed, the potential energy of plasma to become energy that powers our houses, even our cars. Okay. Why do we have, for example, to pay so much money for medical treatments when it's been shown that there are medical treatments based on very simple technologies which realign the body into a healthy frequency using things like sound, using water that has been infused with a consciousness of healing. There's a Japanese scientist called Masaru Emoto who made a groundbreaking study on the fact that water can retain consciousness and imbue that consciousness to the person who drinks it. That's why there's certain places in the world where if you go into the water, you will be healed of diseases. Just like in the Bible, at the pool of Bethesda, that man who Christ said, do you want to be healed? And he was like, I do, but every time I try to get into the water, someone cuts in front of me. And then Christ said, pick up your mat and walk. And then he was healed. So there's so much about human history, human evolution, human sciences, and the humanities and the law and the economy, politics, all these things that have experts in their field. But these so-called experts are not aligned with the consciousness of the majority of human beings who want to live in harmony and peace, who want to be healed without having to have their bodies cut open, without having to pay an arm and a leg, without having to lose their house so they can pay for their medical treatment. People who don't want to live in poverty, who want to work hard, but the economic system does not allow them because it doesn't give them access to capital or materials that the economy says must be used for these things. Going back to plastic, why don't we, by now, with all our intelligence, surely, and we have actually created biodegradable plastic-like bags, which you use, and then when it goes into a landfill, it degrades. It doesn't become pollution, doesn't become microplastics, which end up in the fish we eat, which even end up in the fetuses in people's wombs, in women's wombs. For God's sake, you know what I'm saying? So you as a human being need to start making your voice heard about the kind of world you want to live, the kind of culture you want to be the consciousness that drives the political, social, and economic systems of this world. Just you thinking it affects the collective consciousness of humanity. You speaking it has even more of an effect. You recording yourself while you're speaking it and disseminating it to other people, even more effective. And then you actually creating new systems that challenge the status quo, vastly more impactful. Everything that we do sends out a signal into the collective consciousness, into the ether. These are things that they don't want us to talk about and understand, because then we will know just how powerful we are in our ability to affect reality, change reality, and take back what we rightfully own as the inhabitants of this planet. Okay, thank you.